I want to start by going through a few concepts that will help to keep everyone on pace with this presentation. So first concept is that of a node. So this is all the computers in a blockchain network that sync all the blocks and keep up with the chain. Next is the concept of a key, a cryptographic key, which allows us to authorize things and to sign transactions or sign things that we authorize those things. And lastly is that of an ASIC or a crypto mining machine. This is a machine specifically made to mine cryptocurrency. One more, the concept of a wolf. So a wolf is a cunning predator that waits for an opportunity and takes advantage. So let's look around where things are today. So if we look at the top 10 cryptocurrencies on CoinMarketCap, we know Bitcoin is secured by proof of work. We also know Dogecoin is secured by proof of work. And the rest of these in here are either stable coins or chains secured by proof of stake. And if we go further down the list and look at the top 20 coins, all of these, except for the humble Litecoin in number 20, are all secured by proof of stake. When we look at this number of Bitcoin dominance, we can assume that whatever number is not here, the 59 or so percent, is all pretty much secured by proof of stake or assets that are secured by proof of stake chains like stablecoins. To give you a sense of why this is happening, you can see here a YouTube video using the Cosmos SDK that you can create your own blockchain in 5 minutes. Now, if you contrast that with the challenges of starting a proof of work chain, it's a night and day difference, and we can understand why there are so many proof of stake chains. Newer projects such as Aptos raised $150 million just a couple months ago. Sui, $300 million. These are massive raises, and these are all bets on projects that are secured by proof of stake. There are new proof of work projects that have come out in the last few years. Nervos is an example of one, Handshake is an example of one, and Cadena is an example of one. Even though there is innovation happening in the proof of work space, for the most part, proof of work is seen as slow and antiquated and a relic of the past. So let's start by examining proof of work. We see images like this in the media and we're told that miners are competing to solve math problems or computational puzzles. And these ASIC machines, and there are lots of them, there are literally millions of these machines around the world. They're chugging along continuously 24 hours a day mining. And this is truly global. Anyone can start mining. Even if all the miners in the world stopped, someone could come in with new miners and the system would continue going. And there's no identity attached to any of these machines or anything that's happening in the network. Even though we see a world with borders, as far as proof of work chains are concerned, the world is truly borderless. And there's no identity or anyone attached to anything that's happening. Well, what is happening in a proof of work network? So we have transactions that are put through an ASIC miner with a random number, and there's a mathematical formula that's done. And this process is repeated over and over again. And it's happening at massive scale, like literally millions of these machines going, until one of these machines finds a certain number that meets the difficulty of the Bitcoin network. And then that number, that solution to that problem, is verified and propagated throughout the network. All these nodes share with all the other nodes the solution to this problem. An important thing to note here is that inside this solution, all of the work of all of these machines, millions of machines that are running, is contained just in this single solution. There's no information stored on the chain about what each miner, each mining entity, each mining pool, what everyone was doing, what everyone was mining. All the information we need to know is contained inside this single solution that's easily verifiable. And these blocks are all chained. As these solutions stack up, they're committing to the solutions before them, which makes it even harder to redo this work. Someone described it well recently. They referred to the Bitcoin chain as this large energy ball that we all look up and see in the sky. And someone else could create a competing energy ball, but it would be not even visible in size next to this large energy ball. There's a QR code here with the link. So as we sync the Bitcoin blockchain, we can kind of get a sense for what proof of work gives you. So let's say this is a grandma with the cell phone in 2022 that wants to sync the chain. She's going to start by syncing all of these solutions to that problem. And she can do this with a cell phone. She can verify these solutions. So she'll start by looking for the Genesis block, which we know that contains the text "Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks." And she'll start just downloading these solutions and checking them. Now, a wolf, no matter how big or how small or how big, could try to influence this. But because of all of this computation, there's no way that any sort of actor could create something that compares to the size of what these miners are doing. And all these miners that have invested all this money in equipment and infrastructure are all incentivized to operate in keeping the network flowing in an orderly manner. So I want to stop for a moment here and just speak about the elegance of what we see in this network. So we have a grandma here who knows nothing about computers, anything like that. She just downloaded an app. And there's no trust in this network. So with Bitcoin, in a matter of seconds, she can verify 14 years of history and know what she's looking at, just with a cell phone and some math. And this is important. Bitcoin years ago was referred to as the trust machine, which is a very important concept in a world of declining trust. And this trend of declining trust has been going on for decades now. And COVID didn't help. This is just continuing. We even now have nations losing trust in other nations and losing trust in other nations' currencies, things playing out at a very high level in terms of this loss of trust. So having the idea that we all can universally trust something in our world is an important innovation. I want to go back to that idea of proof of work being antiquated. So there's plenty of innovation in the proof of work sphere, body of science and work. The first one I want to talk about is Chia, which was a huge step forward in terms of the issues that people usually attribute to proof of work or Nakamoto consensus, and that is the energy usage. So with Chia and some clever math, they've been able to replace this idea that proof of work miners need to use ASIC machines and consume lots of electricity. And they use hard drives, which consume a much smaller amount of electricity, but still deliver the same kind of properties that we saw before in terms of it's easily verifiable, and it's very, very hard, impossible to redo the work of the network. Next is Fly Client, which speeds up that process I was referring to before about syncing with the network and is very useful for applications beyond just Bitcoin. If we want to do smart contracts, things like that, they're more complicated, and Fly Client speeds up those syncing processes. Next is Stratum v2, which takes away the centralization risk that mining pools present. So right now, mining pools will create the blocks, and anyone participating in those mining pools has no power over what goes into those blocks. With Stratum v2, which is made by the Brains team, the actual miner who is doing the mining will create the block, and the mining pool serves a function more of just distributing rewards amongst people participating in the pool. Last is Quinn Network. I spoke with this team today. They're developing a merge mined network of blockchains, which is very interesting. Still more, Cadena brought sharding to the proof of work space. So sharding is the idea of splitting up the work of a blockchain network into a number of different chains. So Cadena has 20 different chains, all secured by proof of work. There's also Babylon, it comes out of the Cosmos ecosystem. The idea is to reuse the Bitcoin mining to secure proof of stake chains. So proof of stake is very challenging to create similar security assurances to proof of work, but by piggybacking off of the Bitcoin network, this project seeks to deliver more security assurances to them. Lastly, from Nervos, we've broken the performance limitations of Nakamoto consensus with a protocol called NC Max. So instead of, say, having a block, 2 meg block every 10 minutes, block sizes can be variable and adjust to network conditions. And again, all of these innovations carry the same property that an actor of any size doesn't have the ability to influence what's happening or what has happened, and it's all easily verifiable. They can't create that energy ball. And now I think it's good to talk about what everybody's talking about, and that is proof of stake. Let's look at all these coins, these great projects, proof of stake. So what's really happening here? So we don't have ASIC miners. We have keys instead. And these keys have money behind them. This is the stake. And this stake could be from individuals, but more often than not, it's from entities, businesses. This is called validators. So a validator will take transactions, or a group of validators will take transactions and sign off on their validity and add blocks to the chain. If you think about someone trying to influence what's being signed or just the concept of a signature, it's very different from that idea of influencing large amounts of computation spread throughout the world. And a wolf may look very different. A wolf may look like this. And when we financialize this whole process of syncing, it starts to look very different. And to someone like this, it may start to look quite familiar. So we go from something that looks like this and is just kind of this otherworldly, futuristic thing of people plugging in computers to something that looks a lot more like this. And this notion of identity gets introduced into proof of stake systems with that idea of a key and money behind a key. Whose money is it? Who is this? And that's just not the case when we're talking about what, computers are executing math. And in proof of stake, the intermediaries and assets will fit well into existing legal frameworks. And it's inevitable that regulation increases barrier to entry into these systems, to be intermediaries in these systems. In terms of existing legal frameworks, so Ethereum was unique in that it was an asset that was proof of work for some time and then moved into proof of stake. Many of these chains are proof of stake from the start. So you have an asset being created that then generates more of that asset. It's always been kind of closed in and harder for new entrants to get in, and also looks more like a security than something that's generated through proof of work. All of this has the effect of consolidating power. And an important thing is the fact that people like convenience, people like money, and proof of stake has told us that everyone can stake their coins, everyone can get money. It's an egalitarian change to all of this. The problem is most people are not going to run the infrastructure to do this staking themselves. So more than likely, they're running this through an intermediary. And these intermediaries gain asymmetric power. So if you look at, this is a past event of Tron taking over Steam and exchanges who had users' coins cooperating with this takeover. Now, the users of those exchanges, the actual owners of those coins may have disagreed, but because an exchange held those coins, they had the power to make those decisions. And an issue with proof of stake is that if anyone is choosing not to stake, they're getting diluted. So it works well if we all stake, we all get 4 or 6%, but anyone who's not choosing to stake, loses that because that's basically inflation. And the rich do get richer. And I'll go into a second how this contrasts in terms of proof of work versus proof of stake. Yeah, right. In proof of work, you have high operating costs, and it's a high cost to create blocks. So a miner mining, say, Bitcoin, needs to sell back a good percentage of that Bitcoin back to the market to cover their electricity costs. In proof of stake, there are no real costs. You have small costs of operating servers, but those coins can, for the most part, just accumulate in the staker's hands. Also, this cost to create blocks comes in as well, The event of the Bitcoin Cash fork nearly bankrupted Bitmain because they chose to mine on a competing chain to Bitcoin, and that cost them real assets. Now, if you look at the idea of creating a competing fork in proof of stake, you would just need to line up the political connections to the capital to create that competing fork, and once you had it, you could just run with it. There's also a constant turnover in miners and pools. Because of this idea of cost and operating a business, businesses go out of business, pools go out of business. There's constant turnover in these actors in this system. And it will not be the case in proof of stake protocols because of a lack of cost. Once people or intermediaries have a certain amount of stake, they will hold that amount of stake and probably grow. And depending on implementation of things, this can be even worse. Say in Ethereum's example, there's no way in Ethereum's example, you need to have 32 ETH in order to be a staker on the network, a validator on the network. If you have less than 32 ETH, there's no way to delegate, say, 15 of my ETH, 15 of someone else's ETH to someone to create 32 ETH. I actually need to hand my actual cryptocurrency, custody of that cryptocurrency, to someone else, an exchange, for example. And that exchange would then have to give it back to me. Exchanges will also issue derivatives on those coins as well, which will feel like I still have my money because I can still move it around, but it will be a token issued by that exchange and they'll continue to have that capital. Proof of work is also simple to understand and simple to implement compared to proof of work or proof of stake, which is complicated. And this has security implications, but I think it also has implications toward people trusting in this system. If someone can understand something in a few minutes rather simply, they're going to trust it more than something that takes a long time for someone to explain and is arguably impossible to understand. And proof of work is objective. That concept of that energy ball or seeing the outcome of all of that computation it's an objective measure. Proof of stake, on the other hand, is subjective. It really is just a certain number of keys signing something. Those keys could sign something else. Those keys could sign something else 10 years from now. And there's really no difference between these things except for what people subjectively agree upon. I did forget about grandma though. So grandma in proof of stake system has no solution to point at, has no genesis block to look at, needs to find a checkpoint from someone in the network to trust. And this could be a checkpoint far in the past if she'd like to verify a lot of history, but more than likely is a checkpoint very close to what's just happened. And she'll sync these signatures. But an important consideration is that this checkpoint can be influenced. It can be adjusted. It's not being verified in the same way that proof of work would be. So I think an important thing to consider at this point is what is at stake. So Bitcoin was a paramount innovation. It created a parallel system to legacy finance. It's decentralized, censorship resistant, and it's been referred to as a most peaceful revolution. And proof of work has an important role to play in all of this. It's digital finance for anyone. There's no identity required. It's borderless and it's unseizable property rights. No matter how strong or big an entity is, there's nothing anyone can do to really mess with a sizable proof of work network. And when we lose touch with all of this and just make it about money and it just becomes a financial system, we may see that bankers, like the people that Satoshi did not trust in and did not trust to control the currency, show up again in new ways and new systems. And I want to call attention to the idea of a currency and what a currency does. So when a community shares a currency, they all can interact together. They can do commerce. They're bonded through that currency. And when we have lots of competing things that are mostly very similar in function, in a lot of ways are copies of each other with slight tweaks and a lot of marketing, it becomes more of a shell game for these kind of wolves. And it gets us away from that idea of sharing a currency and moving the world forward in this digital economy. So in closing, proof of work creates a check on institutional power. And it's an important thing that we can't lose sight of. It may be easy to take this for granted because it's been 14 years of cryptocurrency systems being secured by proof of work. But we really need to remain vigilant and remember, what we're standing on with Bitcoin. So proof of stake is not a replacement for proof of work. One of the best comparisons I've read is thinking about the function of gold versus the function of Visa. So no one would try to explain that Visa is a substitute for gold. Now, proof of work creates a physical process to that asset. And it's just very different from proof of stake, which is a much more fragile kind of process. And that comparison of gold to Visa, I think, is apt. So when I look at miners and I see all of the work that is being done to build infrastructure, explore opportunities, and push innovation forward, identify the different ways that proof of work can serve a greater role in our world, whether that be through capturing methane and turning it into carbon dioxide, or stabilizing the grid, or providing a load for new nuclear power and renewables. I think it's important for everyone to remember their vital role in what's happening. Because I think there are always wolves around if you just look for them. So thank you.